This discussion is a continuation of the global North and South divide, and the focus of this is on answering the question flashed on your screen. In the last video kasi, we ended the discussion through explaining how Cold War created world divisions. And the said political tension ended in the late 20th century. And USSR was dismantled, or nawala na yung USSR. Nag-collapse na. That's the right term. Nag-collapse na yung USSR during the 1991. In 1991. So, the terms used during the Cold War, such as First World, Second World, and Third World, also ended. So, ibig sabihin ba wala ng divisions? Well, remember that globalization is an ongoing process. Division was created, and this is the North and South divide. So, why divide the world between North and South? Again, what inspired experts to do that is the events in the Cold War. So they realized that the most powerful countries, the most politically influential countries are in this region. So nasa northern part ng mundo. While the rest, yung accessories lang doon sa Cold War are on the later part. So determined that the primary global divisions are between North and South. And yes, we can really see that this division is fitting. As you can see on the map kasi, this figure is shows the developed and developing countries. The developing, which are on this part, yung yellow part, and then the developed countries, the yellow part, and the green part are the developing countries. So the division is fitting because geographically speaking, mas marami naman talaga yung mga wealthier countries doon sa, or yung wealthy countries doon sa north, and then yung poor countries sa south. However, yun lang ba yung pinagbasihan, geography, or yung territory? Well, hindi. Because as you can see, meron din tayong global north country dito, and then dito sa part na to ng Asia. So definitely, that's one of the main reason. But what's the most determining factor here is the economical aspect of the country. So why are we sure that it's the economical factor that determine this division? Because that gap that separates them, which we call the North and South gap, it's an economic gap. We're gonna talk more of that later. But first, let's discuss what a global north is. So what is a global north? How is it different from a global south? Well, si Ode describe or gave characteristics or standards that in a global north country, these are established democracy, wealth, technological advancement, political stability, aging population, and dominance of trade and politics. So, if a country is very capable of these things, then categorized siya sa global north. Examples of global north are the European and North American countries. So, what's the evidence that countries really in the global north are fitting to this characteristics? Well, we have examples. First is yung G8, or now we call it G7, or the group of seven. So this group is an intergovernmental organization made up of the world's largest developed countries. Who are these countries? We have France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. So, sa picture, sa figure, we used their G8 because Russia was still here in the G8. Kaya lang suspended siya because of some political, may ano kasi siya, may issue siya sa Crimea. They are the world's largest developed economies. And these countries are categorized or under the global north. Another example or another evidence is on the four members of the UN Security Council permanent members. So if you remember, United Nations have member countries. The exact number is 193. However, doon sa 193 na yon, meron pa silang tinatawag na permanent members or Big Five. At ito yung countries na yon. Yung mga kita dyan. Ano mga countries yan? So, alamin nyo po. So, you have there, the four of this, their home is in the global north. So, this, you can be privileged to be in the UN Security Council as long as you have strong economic influence or power. So, that's one of the reasons why. So, So, what about the Global South? Well, kung ano yung ikinayaman ni Global North, yun naman ang contrary na characteristics ni Global South. If you remembered yung mga minention ni Ode na characteristics, yun naman ang problem ni Global South. Because the term Global South is a metaphor for interstate inequality. So, from there alone, you can see the negativity because of the word inequality. And this inequality or interstate inequality is a product of Western imagination. So, why inequality? Because Global South is usually exploited and there are a lot more. We're gonna discuss it one by one. Some of these inequalities. So, who is Global South now? Well, this refers to countries that are not as economically sound and politically stable as their global north counterparts. Again, kung ano yung ikanayaman, kinastable ni global north in terms of economy and politics, yun naman yung hindi ma-achieve ni global south. So why? Now, there are factors that contribute to this. First is yung poverty. So, poverty is the state of one who lacks possessions. It is the lack of basic needs such as clean water, nutrition, healthcare, education, clothing, and shelter. So, poverty is not just having no income or few income, but it's the sum of all the lack of your basic needs. And sad to say, in countries in the global south, this is very rampant because only 1 to 5% can get enough basic needs, can get their basic needs. Only 1 to 5% of the population. And this percentage is very, very little, you know. Whereas in the global north, 95 to almost 95 can get their basic needs. And very observable naman because they have good healthcare services, right? They have, the government can supply their needs. So that's a thing we cannot experience as of now. Another is to emphasize the growing issue on poverty is yung tinatawag ng UN Economic and Social Council na LDC or Least Developed Countries. So, among the poor countries, may na-identify pa sila using the criteria set by UN Economic and Social Council na 46 doon sa mga poor countries. Na yung 46 na yun yung poorest of the poor. Next factor that makes global south experience interstate inequality is the presence of unfair labor practices. So ULP are offenses committed by the employer or labor organization which violate the constitutional right of workers and employees to self-organization. Well, if you're gonna observe, I used this picture, OFWs, because there were issues on the application of OFWs, whereas dito, they graduated as a nurse, they have license, they are licensed nurse, Oh, and then they applied abroad as a nurse. However, when they get there, iba na yung work na binibigay sa kanila. So, these are very common stories sa mga nag-a-apply abroad. And this is very saddening. And this event is not only happening in the Philippines. There are a lot more. Like in India, there are children who are forced to do labor, and yung working environment pa ng mga batang ito is very hazardous. Sa Philippine Constitution, inaalaw yung 15, below 18 na magtrabaho hanggang 15. So, minimum is 15. Pero, given na ang environment is not hazardous. Next is war and conflict. Right, yung World War is natapos na 1940s. However, war and conflict is still happening around us. An example of that is the Arab-Israeli wars. The main reason why they have this conflict is because of the difference in religion and in perspective. So, another one is the discrimination between them. And this war did not happen one time lang. It's a series of military conflicts. So, next is the democracy in Global South. The democracy in the Global South is summarized by the picture shown in this video. Democracy, it's not a new thing to the Global South. In fact, there are countries in the Global South who are already democratic. However, our democracy is superficial. Why superficial? Because commitments of some of the governments in the Global South to regular elections, say for instance, and human rights are fragile. So, parang sa picture, very superficial kasi we show the people that we want to help them by having a democratic government. But in reality, the processes, the decision making are not really pro-democracy. An example of that, a great example of that is Myanmar again, because for a very long time, their form of government is military. And then, because of issues from other countries, from the people, they welcome democracy. However, their democracy is superficial. Parang, yung front lang, yung democracy nila. So, as time goes by, lumabas din yung totoong form. Yan, balik na naman sa military ngayon. So, that's one of the main reasons why we're lagging behind the global north. So, if not democracy, ano pala yung present sa global south? We have tyranny and anarchy. These two are very contradicting because tyranny means having a cruel and strict government, while anarchy is having no government at all. And both of these forms of government are very, very harmful to civilians. And those who are in the global north, they are neither the two. They're just here in between, sitting pretty. They're playing safe because for them it's the most, kung sa temperatura, ito yung pinaka magandang temperatura. Neither cold nor hot. Yan. So, yan yung kaya tayo naglalag behind. Next is on research and development in the global south. We have a lot of funds allotted for research and development, but we can't use this properly. In Partido State University alone, instructors are encouraged to perform this, but they cannot really utilize the fund because of a lot of factors. And if there are researches naman and innovations, sadly, these innovations naman are solution towards the problems of global north. Meaning, hindi siya localized, hindi siya customized. If you get what I'm saying. Global South countries have been unable to evolve an indigenous technology appropriate to their own resources. Because people who are doing this, ang nasa isip kasi nila is on the need of the local country, but on how they can profit from it. So this is very different. Very different. So we are not excelling in research and development. We have this summary. So first, in terms of population, North has lesser population and large population naman sa South. The implication of this in terms of government is mas natututukan ng government sa North yung citizens, yung population niya. Whereas sa South, fragile na nga yung political system, madami pang aasikasuhin na citizens. In the North, there's high wealth. In South, low wealth. In North, standard of living is high. In South, standard of living is low. In North, there is high industrial development, and in South, low industrial development. And last but not the least, in North, the northern countries are mostly industrial, and the southern countries are agricultural. So these are the differences of the global North and South, and these are also the factors that separates them. Nag-expand ng gap between them. So, is there a chance to close this gap between the global North and global South? Well, the United Nations has developed a program dedicated to narrowing the divide through its Millennium Development Goals. And these includes improving education and healthcare, promoting gender equality, and ensuring environmental sustainability. However, in my opinion, closing the gap it will take time, lalo na kapag individually we're not into it. So, you have the idea, you have the knowledge about this gap between the global North and South. Make sure you use this knowledge in good terms. So, that's all for our topic in the global North and South gap. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have questions, yung post ko regarding this doon sa Google Classroom natin, you may comment on that doon sa post ng material na may link ng video lecture na to. So, that's all. Thank you.